Okay, good morning, good afternoon. Let's get started. Welcome to today's webcast, Shift to the Left, Delivering Discontinuous Improvements with Remote Solutions. My name is Thomas Meredith, the Marketing Director for RTM Consulting, and I will be monitoring today's session. We've got a lot of people logged in today, and we're excited to bring this content to you. First thing I want to do before we begin is cover a few items. First, we are recording the webcast, so once we get it archived and up on the site, you'll receive an email with a link to the recording that you can listen to at your convenience. You can also log on to our webinars page, rtmconsulting.net/webinars. You'll find the recording there as well as all of our on-demand webcasts that you can view at any time. A copy of the presentation slides are available if you are interested. Please email your request to info@rtmconsulting.net. That's info@rtmconsulting.net. Email us your request and we'll send you a PDF copy of the presentation. Also, please feel free to ask questions throughout the webcast. You can put them in your questions pane there in the GoToWebinar window. We'll have a brief Q&A session at the end of the webcast to answer all of your questions. And also for folks who are interested in PDU credit for this, one is available for attending this session, and that information will be available at the end of the webcast as well. Okay, good. That takes care of my housekeeping items, so let's get started. Presenting today's webinar is Bill Steenberg. Bill is Managing Partner here at RTM Consulting and heads up our support and field services practice. He has extensive experience leading complex services operations in multiple global companies supporting enterprise and consumer companies. Bill, I think we're ready. I'll throw it to you. It's all yours.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, audio sounds good. Thanks, Bill.
Thanks. So welcome to all the attendees today. As Thomas noted, I'm Bill Steenberg, and I'd like to say how excited I am actually to have the opportunity to talk to you today about what I consider one of the largest opportunities facing the services industry. You know, in preparation for this webinar today, I stood back and thought, I said, oh my goodness, I had actually been in the services industry now for 50 years. Now, I started at 7 doing heating, ventilation, air conditioning work for my dad at what was then Steenberg Services, so you can figure out how old I am. But remote services were around back then. We did industrial applications for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, and if one of the fabric mills went down, it would always start with a pre-call from my father to the owner of the mill or whatever, and they would try and troubleshoot the situation over the phone. Now, they didn't call it remote solutions or anything, but certainly understood, without saying it such a way, the concept of channel optimization and the costs that were going to be involved with him having to make an on-site visit versus being there. So if remote solutions have been around a while, the question then becomes, you know, why are they just starting to reach their potential now? And I really think the promise has come up in the last 5 to 7 years, and there's a number of factors. Some are technical ones, like the digitization of almost everything, the cloud or Web 2.0, significant improvements you can see in mobility, and others are maybe more macro trends, like globalization and the growth of services economies throughout the world, and the ability to use, you know, international labor arbitrage as part of your solution set. But today is really about how you put that together and can deliver discontinuous results by shifting to the left, as we call it, which is using remote solutions to help you optimize your service delivery channels, right? And while this webinar will focus greatly on field services and support services, the concepts and the deliverables in remote solutions can and do play in other service environments such as professional services. In fact, as part of my responsibilities as a Senior Vice President of Direct Services, the professional services business came under me, and we used remote solution capabilities at that time for both pre- and post-sale opportunities within our business. As far as the agenda goes today, we'll briefly cover the objectives of what we are all going to get out of the session today. Provide a little background on RTM Consulting. I think it's important for you to understand a little bit of our credibility and where we come from when we speak to this topic. We're then going to talk about the strategy shift to the left and actually what is it. And probably in my mind, what becomes the most important part is executing the shift, effectively executing it. As Stephen Case says, the strategy that can't be executed is hallucination. And I've seen a lot of organizations we work with that have great strategies for various things. Remote solutions is one, but because they don't have the execution down in a systemic way, they're never able to capture the next topic we're going to talk about, which is the benefit. And then we'll summarize quickly. 5 simple objectives today. 1 is to learn how you can achieve these discontinuous improvements in both your financial performance, your customer experience, and your employee productivity by executing the shift. 1 is to learn how to use the framework process and the transformation process to help you do that. Next would be to learn how to make remote solutions a company-wide initiative. I don't want to say it's a showstopper if remote solutions are a service-only initiative, but certainly the concept of optimization just gets thrown out the window if, in fact, the service group is the only group supporting it, much like the concept of customer satisfaction if it's only delivered at the end of the value chain. I think next we'll learn how to quantify the benefits. One of the keys to getting the order is for the services leadership to actually be able to quantify these benefits and get the order from the company. And lastly, we'll learn how to avoid some of the common failure modes. In a lot of companies I see, the service leadership will fight like hell to get something like this and make it a company initiative. They'll get the required investments. But some say something as simple as a failure to deliver some quick hits or missed deliverables against what I would call an overly optimistic business case undermines the credibility of the strategy, right? And then in the next strategy and business plan cycle the following year, they lose the battle for the limited investment fund, and they never reach their full potential. So there's a series of things you really need to be cautious of so that you don't run into those failure modes. As I said earlier, I think it's first important for us to provide a brief background on RTM Consulting and, for me personally, to establish a credibility as a knowledge expert on this topic. First, let's start with a little background on RTM Consulting. In a nutshell, we're a consulting company with a very, very targeted market. Our mission is to help services companies, services organizations, services like consulting, professional services, field services, support services get better at what they do, which means delivering better results. So we differentiate ourselves by our thought leadership, innovative frameworks, and implementable solutions. And those solutions are all delivered by very experienced operational senior leaders who have kind of been there, done that. And that enables those implementable solutions to actually get to real business results, accelerated results that are real and sustainable. I think that to give you a little background on myself so you understand, I've been with RTM Consulting as a partner since the beginning of 2013. Prior to that, I was the Senior Vice President of Direct Services. I had responsibility for what was the technical or field services portion of the business, the support services portion of the business, and professional services, and the outsourced document management services. It was up to $5 billion and 28,000 people, and we used a very comprehensive remote solution strategy as a part of our success. And I'll share some of the successes that came out of that and the results we used with a similar strategy, not quite as robust as the one we're talking about here today. I also spent time as the EVP of operations of a small software company in the services space. I ran Senior Vice President of Customer Service Support at Danke Corporation. I had responsibility worldwide for the number of service employees and the revenue streams there, and began my career post-college with 17 years with various service positions at Eastman Kodak Company, half of them in field locations and half of them in infrastructure assignments, where we both used remote solutions to help us run our business better. I retired at 55 last year, and I did it a year and a half ago because I wanted to participate more broadly in these transformations that are going on in the service industry, and this is one. And was fortunate to connect with RTM because I think they're really best positioned to help customers improve their business and deliver the real results that I was talking to you about earlier. This is a targeted list of some of our customers. I'm not going to go through them, but we should walk away from there. Their clients predominantly are high-tech industry, growing focus on healthcare industry, and they range from Fortune 500 names with billions of dollars in revenue to both medium and smaller businesses. We will be presenting this concept of the shift to the left next week at Technology Services World in Las Vegas with one of our clients, CareStream. CareStream is a $2 billion healthcare company that provides diagnostic imaging solutions, and we're currently in engagement with them on remote solutions. Additionally, the CEO of RTMC next week, Randy Mislovic, will be presenting with Bo DiMuccio on Bo's with TSA on modernizing the resource management functions at TSW. And it's a topic for which Randy's known throughout the industry as a thought leader and has the trademark JTR solution set, just-in-time resourcing solution set. Another of our partners, managing partners, Mark LaCroix, is also going to be presenting with one of our clients, Sean Phillips of NCR. He's going to speak on how to integrate consulting services to accelerate revenue growth and customer value. So if you find yourself at Technology Services World in Las Vegas next Monday through Wednesday, please join us for one of these seminars, or perhaps just join us on the show floor for a drink and a little conversation. Now let's get to what we mean by what is the shift to the left, and actually what is it? Now, first polling question, what is the shift to the left? Could it be Dancing with the Stars, secret step needed to win it? My wife claims she saw Jack Osborne practicing this, but I think Ozzy's kid's going to need more than that to take home that Mirrorball trophy, so we'll check that one off and say it's not it. You know, could it be a productivity step on the Apple keyboard? You know, there's a big announcement next week for Technology Services World coming from Apple on 10/22. Everyone in the industry thinks it's about new and improved iPads, but maybe it could be much, much more. Maybe they could be announcing a shift to the left on their keyboard. I'm still trying to figure out, you know, we know on the PC keyboard there's a delete in the backspace. Where do you find the backspace on the Apple keyboard? And maybe we'll find out next week. Not that one. Third, is it a critical highway maneuver in LA? Obviously not the right answer, but it is certainly one of the many unique moves you can find out there that you don't find in your driver's education book. Certainly when I'm out there, I try and figure out whose idea it was to have left-hand exits off a highway that's 4 or 5 lanes, and it always creates some interesting maneuvers. When we posted this on the web, one of the first responses about this webinar we got back is a political commentary was shift to the left, but let me assure you it does not refer to the shift to the left term or to the left term that originated during the French Revolution in the late 1700s. The real question is obviously number 4. The shift to the left is about optimizing in a way that uses your remote solutions to shift your delivery channels. And the real question by now you should be asking, who cares? You know, why is the shift to the left important to me? And it is important because in today's world, a very, very competitive world, customers are always looking for more and more out of your service organization, whether it's better response time, improved uptime, better cost structure, more personalized experience, or maybe the ability to take full advantage of the solution your company provides and helping them run the business more successfully. You know, your company's leadership and shareholders always look for better financial results, lower costs, greater revenue, better productivity, and ultimately a better return on their invested capital. And this concept of shift to the left, in fact, offers you the ability to accomplish all of the above. And the concept's quite simple. You use remote solutions to appropriately shift your services delivery to the left along a continuum, and the continuum has an on-site component, an on-call component, and an online component. And by doing so, you can ultimately lower your costs, improve the time to problem resolution, and when done correctly, you can serve your customers the way that they want to be served. And notice in this whole thing, if you're going to shift from on-site to on-call, online, obviously remote solutions connectivity becomes a big part and a key enabler to a channel optimization strategy. Because for your business today, you should be stepping back and saying, okay, should I be providing that type of service, you know, on-site, or is it something that can move to online and be done effectively? It's important to note the magnitude of those cost factors too. So, you know, a on-site visit, or some companies call it a truck roll, call it whatever you want, you know, $200 to $1,000 a trip is not unusual. In fact, earlier this week we were with a $2 billion client, and theirs came out in excess of $1,500 a truck roll, and I think absolutely opened their eyes. And as you go across that continuum, you certainly can get to less than $1 once you get it online and it gets set up for web self-service. And not only that, you can do it in a manner that enables you to personalize it for your customers' engagement and maybe proactively meet their needs. there's a lot of important shifts going on in services right now, and one that's in process is service organizations moving to this concept of you're reactive when there's an incident and you handle your customer in a general type of engagement to something you better be more proactive, or better yet, be predictive and provide a personalized experience for me as an individual. That's my expectation. And channel optimization gives you the ability to do just that. Now, you got to be smart in how you do it, because you need to comprehend the value proposition that your customers are placing on each of these various delivering channels you're using. You know, if you push too far to the left in a type of delivery that might compromise the value proposition, it kind of has negative ramifications for your business. So you need to make sure that you're aligning both the cost structure with your entire value proposition. In fact, part of this process as you go through implementing an effective remote solution strategy is defining both what is your external value proposition and what's your internal value proposition. And we'll cover a little bit more on that later. So if you look at this strategy, you know, it's really about effectively moving to the right place on the continuum to deliver services and do it in a way that is the highest value. And by the way, by having these various channels, you know, just effectively implementing various channels on-site, on-call, online, becomes table stakes for another type of effective channel strategy. That is, do you use direct or indirect channels, and how do you use them? By the way, most organizations are already involved in some form of remote solution. Yeah, if they're intellectually honest, very few could say that they're optimizing their current delivery channels. Thomas, are you getting some feedback on the line?
I am. And I just started. I'm not. Everybody's muted, so I'm not sure if that's coming on your end or not. Oh, there, okay. It's tailed off there.
Okay, thanks. So, you know, going on the agenda and talking about the importance that I thought up front about effectively executing it, you know, this is where the rubber meets the road. If everyone's already doing remotes, you know, why aren't their channels optimized already? And the real reason is this can be an incredibly challenging task, and it requires something that a lot of companies don't do well, and that's effective cross-functional integration and alignment of people, process, and technologies. It's one of the true examples of a team sport in your company. In many, many companies we work with are still very siloed functionally in how they approach it. And this really needs to be a company-sponsored strategic initiative that requires this systemic and cross-functional support. You'll go from R&D to product design, manufacturing, your integrated supply chain, your IT or IM departments, sales, marketing, service engineering, support, learning, development, the entire services operations. And that really, really has to happen, right? And, you know, if you really think about this, there's a real talent needed for excellent project management here and challenges. This is cat herding at its best, right? To pull these various groups together and get them aligned behind this singular focus. And without this systemic orientation, what happens is the organizations revert to siloed behavior. You know, silo produces way low on the results scale in my mind. And while they may optimize an individual functional organization, it usually sub-optimizes the whole organization. And I can tell you it will always sub-optimize effective channel organization. And to be quite candid, it never ceases to amaze me how smart, talented senior leaders will treat remote solutions if it were a services-only initiative, and then wonder why the results are never achieved, right? So, you know, you wonder why you don't get the results, and yet you don't set up in the commercialization process the ability to connect or stay connected. Or once you're connected, the information you get, the data, the ones and zeros, did you turn that data into useful information to resolve the problems? Other more organizations may introduce singular point solutions, and it's the same type of thing. You can't get there. Much like your customer loyalty needs to be cross-functional the same way, right? As good as you can be in the post-sale side, if the product you've got has poor quality and bad reliability, it's really, really tough to perfume the pig at that stage of the game once it's out of the gate. So this cross-functional concept plays in other ones too. That's why what we've done at RTM Consulting, and we think you really need to take a look at doing this yourself if you're getting into this, is we developed a strategic framework and a holistic transformation process to enable companies to capture that value. This is our remote solutions framework. It's a framework that provides a very systemic way to look at and assess how you're doing on remote solutions. It's fundamentally, let me try and break it down simply, fundamentally broken down into 4 distinct but very interconnected areas. The first is in any good program, be it services or others, you have to have the right strategy and management surrounding remote solutions. That includes the governance and everything else. It has to be there. Second, across the bottom, you need to have a really strong operations infrastructure to develop and manage and deliver. You have to have that call center, support center, center of excellence, whatever you call it. You have to have knowledge management. You have to have effective knowledge management that's working for you. You have to have a service engineering component done. You have to have a commercialization process. Your learning and development needs to be lined up and tailored to this concept of remote solutions. So depending on how much information you're able to provide remotely is going to depend entirely on the type of individual you have to hire, the type of individual you have to develop, and what you're training on. You have to have that customer loyalty process to get the good voice of the customer on this. You have to have the right technology and tools. What is your knowledge management tool? What is your field services automation tool? What is your professional services automation tool? You need to be managing the performance. I watch more companies set up something like this, and then, primary measure for the manufacturing or product development people becomes UMC, or unit manufacturing costs. Because you don't have your measures aligned, people wonder why you get a product that doesn't produce the reliability that you'd like. You never held the people to that target, right? And you have to have great functional third and cross-functional processes. And at RTMC, we really look at 11 cross-functional processes in 4 areas: the planning area, back office, go-to-market, and employee. And processes like commercialization, serviceability, product development are huge in how they play here. Processes up front in the planning, like strategy planning. Did you plan and develop early in the process for remote solutions? And then migrate that to the annual business plan. Did you fund it, right? Did you do that? Think of your sales management process and your deal management process for large deals. Do sales get involved, and are you explaining to the customers the value of remote solutions? Or do they think the only value is if Bob or Carrie or Mary shows up at the door to fix their problem? So it's really this concept of pulling all the functional processes together. And then there's that big bucket in the middle called go-to-market, and that's where the execution happens, right? It requires, starting on the left, you have to have those table stakes of on-site, on-call, and online delivery capabilities. They just have to be good. And then, because those are table stakes, right? If you can't produce a good on-site, if you're not doing effective resource utilization of people, if you can't get the right part, right place, right time, right cost, all the fundamentals just have to be there, right? But it also needs to comprehend the customer needs and requirements, and they're changing a lot. So we put some concepts up there of, it's reactive to proactive. The fact that, one time you brought technical knowledge, you better bring a strong business knowledge at the same time to the table with the customer. You better bring a personal type requirement to me, and you better be able to handle not only my known problems, but certainly when you get the connectivity up, there's a lot of unknown problems that you ought to be able to solve in the background that your customer never even sees. Whether you do redundant systems or you actually get somebody online to make some changes to their systems prior to it. The marketing and sales teams, they have to be positioned right and have to understand the role of the plays. And then you need to make sure you fulfill it correctly, right, and effectively. We put in the middle of all of this a cycle of innovation being developed and deployed. And for us, we've really built it around Jeffrey Moore's work in dealing with Darwin. And it's a significant one because what it does is it allows you to recycle core that has become context and bring it back to core before you're done. So example would be, what work can you move from on-site to on-call? You might look at your calls that require parts or no parts. and say, okay, these calls we should not be dispatching somebody to, right? And so you come up with a series of knowledge management things that you can do and that people can talk on the phone with and share with the customer who's calling in the call, and you can get it fixed instantly while you're on the phone. You may start with a level 3 person there, a more technical person, but ultimately you can migrate that to offshore. Xerox, I would tell you, we take that offshore to the cache in the Philippines or Jamaica and everything. After we got it hardened, we always started it with our level 3 engineers, but after we hardened it and we had a good research database, we had a good history, we had good scripts on the phone, we were able to move it to lower cost. And the cost per call is significant. You can do something like that, right? So if the model is this systemic and this complex, and you look at this, you can do one of the holy shits. How do I move my organization to or toward this desired end state? We'd say what you really need to do is you need to follow a transformation process. This is a very simplified version of the process that we recommend and use with our clients. It follows something that most companies already have today, and most companies don't follow, I would have to say, from my experience at talking and working with a lot of companies. And that's you have to have a commercialization or a product development process. And we'd recommend that you have something with that rigor, a phase gate process, to get the most benefits out of this one, right? It really, really is. So let me take a strategy phase, the first one, phase 1, and I'll break that down in a little detail, and then I'll go quickly through the next 4 phases and give you an idea of what's in those phases. In that strategy phase, this is where you develop what your remote solution proposal from a company perspective is going to be, right? This is a cross-functional team. They're assembled and they're chartered to define what's the vision, the strategy, the goals, the initiatives that you need to do, the measures. They do an initial assessment on what technologies do we have today and we're using, on our processes and our people, and start putting together the first view of what the requirements would look like. They do a value proposition for all the channels to make sure they're developed. They do an initial cut at a business plan. I won't call it it's an initial estimate or view, but it's not a final version at that time. That'll happen in the next phase when you really build out the solution. In the second phase is where you really put together that comprehensive cross-functional project plan too. But so you really then integrate this into the company's strategic and annual business planning process. Let me just give you an example. We recently went through this with a large client, and I'll just share a couple of the thoughts, right? Because when we met with they're broken up into 3 or 4 major lines of business. Each line of business has a chief operating officer and a president that runs that line of business. And, one of the things we do is we usually come in and we'll walk the process that the company's using for remote solutions, spend time in each of the areas, but we'll also talk to the senior stakeholders. And it became very apparent in talking to one of the COOs that although the company talked about remote solutions, they really didn't have the buy-in, and behind closed doors, they would just say, this is a fad that's going to die. There wasn't an understanding of the value prop. So, when the core team sat down, they did both an external and internal value prop. So the external value prop was something along the lines of, the name of their company, effectively delivers timely, efficient, proactive, and personalized customer engagements the way you want them, online, on call, or on site, with the objective to ensure you get the maximum value out of your products and solutions, the ones they serve. So, you'd have to step back and say, is that the concept that our sales team is taking when they talk about, have you looked at all the capabilities you have online and taking advantage of, right? Internally, it's a different value prop, right? We develop and implement remote solutions to optimize our delivery channel, resulting in maximum value for our shareholders, and improved total cost of ownership and superior value for our customers, and realization of our employees' full potential. Now, that's just one example. We have other examples from our clients. That's a fairly powerful series of value props, and their vision was really simple. We're going to use remote solutions as a competitive advantage to deliver superior customer value and enhance financial performance. That is their vision, and they've got strategies against it. They've got goals. they've broken it down to 8 initiatives, and I'll share a couple of those with you because they're very comprehensive initiatives that are really getting broken into very, very complex project plans, each one. The first initiative was to establish this cross-functional team, which is going to lead and guide the remote solutions transformation process. Another initiative was to define, build, and utilize remote capabilities via design for serviceability in our commercialization process. So in other words, they're starting with something as simple as defining what are the remote fundamentals, the remote solution fundamentals that they have to build into all their solutions. What are the predictive analytics and services that they can do? What are the quick hits we can deliver? Because they know they've got to do stuff on their legacy products to support that business model while they're making the journey on how their new and improved products are going to be significantly better on it. They've got another major initiative around knowledge management. They've got another major initiative around their center of excellence. I think a couple others. They've got one around implementing improved remote solutions online, a Web 2.0 capability, because they're really, really weak. They don't even do software loading, version loading online. So there's some real fundamental things. One of them is to develop and implement solution offerings, remote solution offerings they're selling. There's a workforce transformation. So there's 7 or 8 major initiatives that they put into this. Now they're entering the define phase, and this is, the define phase, you get the meat and the bones, right? This is where you get that full project plan, where your project manager makes them, produces their value for this one, because this is hard. This is the herding cats, getting everybody on the same page, right? Got to give them the same metrics and everything you got. And by the way, this team did the same metrics too. So this team's metrics include remote solutions rate, profit per employee, cost savings to the company. So if they can make UMC go up, the unit manufacturing costs go up, but the total cost of ownership or the total cost to produce it go down, it's a home run for this team. And they're going to be measured and incented appropriately to do that, right? So that's the type of stuff you really need to do. In the define phase, you spend a lot of time looking at the technology, the people, and the process. Make sure you get them fully validated, right? You really, really need to understand them. You start carrying inside your voice of customers, see what you can learn from that, how you can work it. And you start refining this channel optimization strategy. You develop it, and now it's time to get the targets and business plans refined. So for this company we're working with, it's just exiting gate 1. They've got a business plan. They know what their benefit is, and it's between 20 and 30 million for them. But they need to determine how much of that is going to be cost out, how much of it is going to be productivity to enable them to grow revenue and not have to add additional costs, and how much of it they're going to have to spend on investments to make sure that they can keep this on track, right? That's the type of stuff that comes out in the define phase of this. Then you've got build, adapt, and execute. Very similar processes that you might think. On build, you finally validate, you develop and validate your solutions and everything. You get all your functional processes developed. Gaps are identified. You've got some pilots out and running, and the whole value chain is now ready. Adopting it, you have it out there. Executing and going against it. In reality, most organizations, since they're already doing some remote solutions, you've got to run a parallel path. If you're just starting up, you can do a path like this, but there's a parallel path where you're going after all the quick hits. You can get those tactically implement short-term improvement opportunities in all the functional areas while you implement this systemic process that'll take you a year or 2 to implement to get all the value that you want. So, just a couple tips when you're doing something like this to prevent the common failure modes, because this is hard, and there are some key lessons you can get to make your journey a little easier. Remote solutions or channel optimization, you have to be both strategic and tactical. You need this solid long-term strategy, but it's got to be supported by short-term tactical initiatives that move you, to or towards whatever your end state is. You need to ensure that you have these quick hits to keep the momentum going, right? You can't walk away from a 90, 360-day financial window that the street holds you to, yet you can't be held to that 90, 360-day window because you've got to be investing in these longer-term ones. It's really about alignment and balance. you need to balance the financial customer employee. You need to balance that short and long term, the people, the process, technology. All three of those things need to be balanced. But more importantly, I'd say you need to have alignment as you're going across. I'd say that the technology is important, but it always is. Core technologies are always critical, but often technology-centric solutions in and of themselves are ineffective. The knowledge management may be one of the better examples. It's very important to have the knowledge management technology there, but that's one of the enablers. Having the technology around knowledge management does not enable remote solutions without doing these other systemic things we've been talking about. I feel like a broken record on the fourth bullet there, that no silos allowed. This is a team sport. Everyone has to play. It's got to go all the way up to your performance measurements, your reward and recognition. You do not want to screw this up. In fact, if you want to screw it up, all you have to do is have a siloed incentive or bonus program, and everybody quickly returns to their functional foxholes, right? And it's lights out, game over as far as delivering the results you talked about. I also think good sense and experience counts. I'm a firm believer, and there's no such thing as common sense. There's good sense, but it's not common. But you really need the talent that has been there and done that to accelerate this path forward, prevent from making costly mistakes, and also to follow. Pareto plays really big in this, right? Very often, 20% of what you need to do is going to give you 80% of your results. And I watch companies strive to deliver 100% in a given area. And in doing so, the project plan falls out of order, and you just don't get the results you need. So you got to have that common sense to go there. Now, the benefits, huge. There's a benefit on financial performance, and I'm going to cover more on that. It's dramatic. It's step function. There's a customer experience. It could be as basic as the response time or fix rate, but as complex as new business opportunities that your client can have because they're using your solution better. There's huge employee productivity, concept of right person, right place, right time, right cost, but with the right information becomes huge. Competitive positioning, woe to those who are late to the table on channel optimization, remote solutions, because they're going to be really, really good business school case studies for the future. And Trucker's really got it right. Remote solutions, is purely one of the most systemic forms of innovation that I've seen in the service space, and helps produce a new dimension of performance. I like thinking about Apple when I think of innovation, right? And to me, Apple wasn't necessarily a product innovation, right? So a lot of your product companies trying to make the journey. It wasn't the iPod, right? It was the advent of iTunes that enabled a whole entirely new offering or solution on how music was offered, how you purchased music, how it was bought. It opened entirely new business models for the entire industry, and it set the traditional business models on its heels. And it's very hard. iTunes is remote solution. It's a form of remote solutions. No more. Now, on our website, we have a benefits calculator, and I'm going to show you the address in a minute to get to this. But as service leadership, I told you earlier, you need to quantify the benefits because you're going to have to justify the impact. So let's play a little game here and take a look at a potential example. Here's a company that has $147 million in service costs. 500,000 calls, let's say 250 days a year, so it's 2,000 calls a day. 294 bucks a call with the blended rate. Let's say there's going to be no shift in call volume. So I'm going to keep the same number of calls. But what I am going to do is I'm going to shift 15% of those calls. So if you look at the current solve rate of 85% on-site, I'm going to work over time, a multi-year journey to get that to 70%. So roughly 30% of my calls can either be handled on-call or on-site, a very easily thing to do. So the question is, what do you think the savings would be? So let's do another polling. Is it 5%? Now, I'm not sure about this. Mama needs a new pair of shoes. It may not be political correct, but I am in Vegas next week, and it just seemed appropriate. You stand by the craps tables for a while, and I guarantee you're going to hear somebody yelling out, "Mama needs a new pair of shoes," but the person's only looking for 5%. Better be looking for a lot more. The odds are on the house. 10%, you start closing the gap in your business plan, or adding more on top of it. 15%, most service organizations are fairly big in the company. You start closing companies gap, and, at 20%. This is huge, right? What a great year for the bonus. Now, remember, we've not changed the number of calls we take at all. So we're not taking any change in calls. By the way, we didn't change either the cost to do any calls. So we didn't make your on-site more productive, say, with better labor utilization or better parts fill rates. We didn't make your depot repair better with improved reverse logistics. So none of those are in here. This is just shifting where we take the call. So everybody have in your mind where you think you're going to be. The reality check is a 0% reduction in calls can yield a 21% return, or in this case for this company, $30 million. How do you get there? It's math, right? You might not have looked at this in the past because you probably didn't fully appreciate the various delivery costs you are spending on your channels or potential delivery channels, right? In this case, on-site with parts is $400, and in a mature state, they're going to move, 4% of the calls to web self-service. By the way, that's a small thing. There are some industry-leading companies in the printer market, in the small printer market, that up to 70 to 80% of the problems solved are actually solved by another customer in a moderated social community network. They'll moderate it, but there'll be other customers solving other customer problems. And it's pretty sophisticated the way they set them up. It sounds simple, but it's very, very sophisticated on that. And remember, even more savings are available if you attack the efficiencies or cost per solve per channel. So the things we talked about earlier, the labor utilization, reverse logistics, et cetera. That web address on the side will take you to RTM benefits calculator, and you can start to use the model and take a look at the potential savings you or your organization might have. We even have a mobile app you can add on your cell phone. I went in and played around with it even today on it. It's easy to do. I will tell you that some of our clients have taken this to a level of sophistication. They start with this model, but they have built some really sophisticated models that they're now sharing with all the groups to understand their own cost structures better. And it's engaging them in some wonderful conversations on what truly is incremental costing, what's full costing. What if we shift this cost out? Can I really capture the savings, or does it just make me more productive? A lot of things on this one, but this is a great starting point. It's very simple. You can do this quickly, and it kind of lets you know the magnitude. And the magnitudes are staggering. That's why, to me, this is probably the most discontinuous thing you can do, your channel optimization, of anything I've seen in 50 years in the service industry. Here's one case study of a $15 to $20 billion high-tech company, and this is their journey. We had significantly lower the best-in-class service operations on remotes. They had a declining margin, field labor costs that were very excessive, and huge geographic challenges, and a declining customer sat. From a solution perspective, they input a holistic strategy. They aligned the groups cross-functionally. They put together a governance process and a measurement system for it. They introduced not exactly like we have, but a cycle of innovation process that did talk about capturing core to context, and then remissioning it back to core, which is the real thing. Capturing context and taking it to core, excuse me. Knowledge management systems were revamped. They developed a lot of new technologies in their commercialization process, aligned their performance management. And they improved in an 8 to 10 year. They almost doubled their remote solution rates, which were already fairly high to begin with. Out of this, they took $1.7 billion out of their cost structure, improved their margin 7 points, cost declined significantly. So, and by the way, customer sat also went to record highs for this company that is 60, 70 years old, and they won the J.D. Powers Award 5 years in a row. So this can really be done, but it's got to really be this cross-functional execution that we were talking about. I'll leave you with some tips for the trenches for the leadership right at the end that I think are really important. And we've talked about some of them, but they're really worth talking about. Remote solutions have to be a company initiative. Remember the concept of silos produce way low on the result side. We just can't allow that to happen. Point solutions by themselves, they don't work. You need this holistic framework and transformation process. They're all necessary but insufficient to get the job done. 3, well, it's a cross-functional initiative and everybody gets there. Don't expect your product development person to come run to you with this one. Don't expect the sales group or the line of business leader who came out of sales at one time to come forward and do this. The service leadership needs to own the business case, and they need to drive it with passion. But more importantly, it's got to be very fact-based, very cross-functional, and keep going up to motherhood and apple pie type goals and measures. Nobody's going to argue that you want to produce an optimized cost structure, a life cycle costing for the company. Even the person who's got product and is being hit on UNC, you can't argue that publicly. Now, when he leaves, he's going to go back into his functional foxhole unless you can get his measures set that way. But it's a really tough one to argue that, yeah, I want our customers to pay a lot more for this because I want to make something out of, nylon that if I'd made out of stainless, you never would have had those 10 service calls a year that you have out of it, right? But I've got a low UNC. That just doesn't pass the Smith test of good sense. The real challenge becomes this cross-functional execution. And that's why I am a huge believer in this concept of a strategic framework and the transformational process that allows you to get from A to E or 1 to 5, wherever your numbers you're using. And I'd leave you with, remote solutions. If you're ever going to channel optimize, you cannot, absolutely, positively cannot optimize your delivery if you don't do remote solutions. But your answer is you're trying to do remote solutions to get remote solutions. You're doing remote solutions because of the absolutely fantastic discontinuous results that it enables for your shareholders, your customers, your client, your employees, and if you're the leader of the organization, the discontinuous results that it brings to you. We're going to open it up for Q&As in a minute. I'll let Thomas take you through how to claim your PDU, but I'm going to finish with a quote from Lovett. I'm a big believer in this concept, the difference between strategy and execution that I started with up front, and the difference between creativity and innovation. In fact, if you do it right and systemically, this thing is about delivering nothing but results. And I love the way that Jeffrey Moore looks at innovation, and he's one of the best minds, in my mind at least, in the business world. But he calls the goal of innovation is to create differentiation that leads to customer preferences during a buy decision. And that's what remote solutions will do for you and your company. You will get the customer's preference during a buying decision, and therefore it will lead to the financial results you're looking for. Thanks for your time today. I tried to leave it 10 minutes, and I think we have that to have some Q's and A's. Thomas, could you moderate the Q's and A's as well as take them through how to get their PDU credit?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Bill. A lot of good information there. A lot of good stuff in today's webcast. Yep, we do have questions that have been coming in, and I want to get to those here. And as you can see, guys, there's some information on the screen now for those who want to claim a PDU credit for this session. You can write down that information there. But, yeah, we did have questions coming in. I'd like to get right to that if you're ready, Bill.
Yes, one took a drink. Thanks.
Good, yeah, absolutely. Let's see, this first one comes in from Andre. This came in at the beginning of the webcast when you were talking about remote solutions and could be effectively used in a pre- and post-sale side of a PS organization. So can you give an example? Do you have an example of how you've seen that used in a PS organization?
Oh, sure. The concept of remote solutions, I won't call them predominant in professional services, but we're there. Let me give you an example of our high-tech company in office imaging. One that I am intimately familiar with, uses remote in their professional services business. The solution they sell, right, it's got a hardware component, it's got a software component, and it's got a variety of business support services. In fact, very often the solution has multiple vendors' solutions working together, multiple vendors' hardware, software, and business process re-engineering, all trying to come together to address, a business need for the customers. And let me give you one way that the pre and then maybe one way that the post-sale would come into play on something like that. In the pre-sales arena, very often the customers have these unique applications that are running on really unique software in a really unique product set. So you just can't plan for every combination and permutation that could come on it. So this company has a potential customer in the pre-sales phase transmit the actual print jobs electronically to them to ensure that the solution that they're proposing will produce results. In essence, what they're doing is remote file testing, right? So while you're in the pre-sales, instead of having somebody visit on site, a professional service person, and do this, we'll actually do it in a centralized call center. In our case, we had centralized call centers in Dallas and in Rochester that would do things like that. On the post-sale side, there actually were solutions that we implemented remotely that the professional services people would get on, as well as post-sale problem resolution. Problems that came in from customers. It could be a very sophisticated software that we were going to load on a customer site, and we wanted to make sure, because of everything else that was touched, that we actually were with them when we did it, so we might do it electronically, but do it from a central location. And usually those were staffed by probably the most experienced professional service personnel we had. Very, very good, because they communicated directly via the phone and their end customers, as well as level 3 for their own professional services customers. So I know it's more difficult the higher you go up in the thought leadership or the amount of solution that comes between the right and the left ear that the professional services team does. But you can capture a lot of that information in knowledge management systems and with technology and enable your professional services organization to deliver those solutions remotely. And it's the same continuum. It's the same thought process that you've got. You probably have a smaller on-site component, that's all.
Perfect. Great. Hope that helps, Andre, there with those examples. This one, got a second one here from Kathleen, and this is actually talking about the benefit calculator, which I love. I think that's a great tool. She's asking about the cost per solve numbers of the delivery channels, and frankly, she wants to know, are they accurate? They seem to vary.
Yeah, they're certainly. The answer is simple. It depends. For some companies, the cost per solve are going to be very close to what you see in their benefits calculator. Actually, they're closer to what you have in the slide when you show the strategy going across, right? But as I mentioned earlier, we're currently working with a multi-billion-dollar client that spends $1,500 on every call. The reality is you should already know what your cost per solves are. What I would tell you is most companies that I deal with do not. They don't have those numbers. So those ranges on slide 10 are fairly reflective of the ranges we see in the service industry, but there are outliers, and with some of them are good reasons and some not. But you got to get your own numbers in that benefit calculator. But that concept of, it costs a boatload at the upper end to have somebody come on site with parts versus it doesn't cost much at all to have somebody do remote. That concept's there, and the question is how big is that magnitude for you? For some manufacturing organizations, it can be thousands and thousands of dollars every time they put somebody on a plane to send them out to fix the manufacturing equipment because they got to fly somebody else. Yep.
All right. I got another one here. This one is from Mark. We are a product company. How do I convince my partners to include remote service when they're developing new products and platforms?
It's a classic example of why it needs to be a company-wide initiative. If you remember in the framework that we shared with you, there was a block under operations infrastructure entitled serviceability commercialization process. You need to have one in your company if you're a product company, but it has to optimize the total lifetime profitability of the solution that you have. As I said a couple times, if you rely on these traditional measures that product development groups use, which is give me an optimized UMC or unit manufacturing costs around a core set of these product features, you are going to, in fact, sub-optimize the total. There's no way around it. The problem is that very often people will make short-term decisions that optimize it to increase the product sales, right? Certainly the marketing or sales people aren't going to say, give me a product that costs more, right? And then I got to sell the value. Hell, give me a product that's cheaper. But and then they leave. They sell it and leave. But it may sub-optimize the total profitability, and that's what your shareholders expect and deserve. So your commercialization process has to look at that, what you plan, what you deliver, and then, we used to look each year and go back and look at each platform and say, you said you were going to deliver X, you delivered Y. Why? And how do you do this? But it was always this concept of cross-functional, and you had to watch the measures and the rewards and recognition that would you get in big trouble fast.
Yep, good. Very good. Thank you. Let's see, we're at 5 minutes. Okay, we got a last one here. I'm keeping an eye on the questions pane. If you guys have anything, go ahead and add a question there. We've got about 5 minutes left. This one has come in from Zane. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Zane. This is a real direct question. Bill, can you give an example of how remote solutions can help drive top-line growth?
Okay, so we talk a lot about cost optimization in this, right, and delivery optimization. I talked about how you can do value realization, but this is a really good question, and I perhaps should have spent more time in this area. So the simple answer, sure, I can give you one. There's a high-tech company in the medical diagnostic imaging field, and this is one I studied and not actually worked with, but the person who runs it used to work for me, so I know them well. They've connected almost all their products and solutions. And the equipment constantly feeds back customer usage data, 24/7, from anywhere in that hospital complex, anywhere in the U.S. or anywhere across the globe, if it's a multinational healthcare company. And then what they do is they take this data and they turn it into something useful. They generate a series of utilization reports. Right? You talk about the concept of closing the consumption of value gap. Utilization reports to provide actionable data for the customer on how to make improvements. And information such as patient scheduling, examination times, what the procedure mix was, the number of examinations. And then what they do is they plot and trend the data, give you a very neat dashboard, and compare it with internal and external benchmarks. And then the important part comes out. They give you a set of information on how you can make directional improvements. And the really cool thing in the top-line growth is what you asked. In the ultimate state, they sell consulting services to help the customer drive improved and sustainable results. So they have a series of business optimization services to drive it. And by the way, this business optimization services that they're selling, these are professional services people on site, paid consulting gigs, that drive a significantly increased stickiness for retention rate, trade win rate, call it whatever you do in your customer thing, and it drives your revenue stream. So, the feedback, and by the way, the feedback from customers is huge. They love this. You're helping make them look better, and you drive top-line growth at the same time with your own consulting services. I think that's the definition of a win-win in this case, right? Your client ends up winning, and you end up winning on the same thing. By the way, the shareholders win too, so I guess that's the third winning.
Right.
I hope that answers the question. That's the quickest one I can think of off the top of my head, Thomas.
Yep, no, good, very good. Thank you, Bill. Okay, we're close here to the top of the hour. I don't see any more questions coming in, but we'll keep this open. If you guys have any last-minute questions, go ahead and enter those in. But we are getting to the top of the hour. I want to be respectful of everybody's time, so we'll begin to wrap up here. Bill, I want to thank you again for your time today.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your busy day. Greatly appreciated. Hopefully you found the information useful. There's contact information there. If you need anything else, please get in touch with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again. I'll echo that. Thank you again for joining us today, and that will wrap up today's webcast. Have a great day, everyone.
The organizer